So welcome everyone. I'm going to share my screen so I can show you my presentation. Do this here. Um, okay, is everyone seeing the beginning of the presentation, Fundamentals of Music Theory? All right,
Yeah.
good. Thank you. Oh, it's going to full screen here. Okay, so this is going to be the first workshop of four. So just in case anyone wasn't aware or hasn't signed up for the other three, they'll be taking place on Wednesdays, except for the third one, which will be on 2 Thursdays from now. They're all on the library's website, our calendar there. But these workshops are all going to cover aspects of music theory that will help you get started with either kind of the building blocks of learning to write music or just to have a better understanding of music and all the basic aspects of music theory. So this will be a very basic course, but we do have a lot of resources within the library to get more advanced learning if this really interests you and you want to learn even more. So I wanted to start off and ask if anyone feels comfortable sharing what their interest is in learning music theory, their background, if anyone wants to share, if you want to unmute or if you want to send it in the chat.
Yes, I can say. I played the recorder at school when I was 12 years old, 12, 13 years old. And we have a daughter who is 8 years old, and we always say that we put her in the music. So I don't know, I saw this course, I thought, oh, maybe I can learn something new though. So that's why I registered.
Awesome, thank you for sharing.
Welcome.
Would anyone else like to share? Oh, looks like it's in the chat. Oh, you picking up the viola after 20 years? That's great. Yeah, never too late to start learning music or to get back involved in it. Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
I'll share too. Same for me. I've been away from playing guitar for quite a long time and got back to it recently and actually took some continuing ed classes in songwriting. So I've actually been writing some songs and felt like I really needed to know a little bit more about music. So I'm going to move in that direction. So appreciate this class.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, it's always good to to have those foundations, and we'll talk more in just a few minutes about why you may or may not need theory and sort of the benefits of it. Thank you. Anyone else before we move along? All right, awesome. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so I just wanted to talk about real quick what we're going to cover across all four. So throughout the four workshops, we're going to cover how to read and write sheet music, which is what we'll talk about today, how to create chords and chord progressions, how to discuss aspects of music and sound, so pitch, timbre, tone, things like that. So, saying something sounds warmer, or like that way to describe and discuss music. And then the building blocks of songwriting, which is what we'll sort of cover mainly in the last one, but everything will be building up to that. All right. And so what this specific lesson is going to cover, we're going to talk about what is music theory. So why use it? Why is it necessary? We're also going to talk about the parts of sheet music. So what does sheet music tell us? What do all the symbols and things like that mean? And then we'll also start talking about pitch, which will lead us into the next workshop, which is where we'll cover things like the major and minor scale, keys, all that kind of stuff. So first, let's talk about what is music theory. So music theory is the study of the practices of music. So music theory is more of the possibilities of music than it is the actual playing. So music has always existed, right? Sound and being able to make sounds with our mouth, instruments, drumming, all that kind of stuff has existed long before theory. Theory is kind of what came after when we wanted to describe what we're hearing when we hear music. So that's what we mean when we talk about music theory. So it doesn't apply to one genre or one instrument. It is sort of the broad spectrum of what music is. Do you need music theory to make music? So the short answer is no. There are lots of musicians, famous ones, the Beatles. None of them ever learned to read or write music. They could play by ear and they understood just kind of intuitively what making music was, what they, were hearing. This sounds good with this, but they didn't know theory. They didn't know how to write sheet music. Eric Clapton, award-winning guitarist, couldn't read sheet music. Michael Jackson, one of the best-selling artists, could write, songs like verbally, kind of to say like, here are the lyrics, here's that melody, but didn't really know concrete what it was that he was talking about. But it was just something that they understood. Sorry, something that they understood. So that kind of leads us into, so why would you learn theory, right? If all these great people can write hit songs without it, well, what's the point of learning it? Well, it's going to help you understand the foundation of music. So it's going to help you know what chords are, how you can make chords, how you can make chord progressions, how you can, riff, things like that. When you understand the rules of how music works, these are the different aspects of it, then that's how you can play around with it and you can be creative with it. Just like any other language, right? If you speak English, you can know how to make contractions. You can know how to correctly use slang and things like that. Well, music is a language of its own. So once you understand this is how this, the key of D major works, well, then I can play these notes over these chords and it's going to sound good altogether. And it's going to also explain why things sound the way they do and how they sound the way that they do. So it's beneficial to learn, even if you just want to understand music better. So if you don't plan on learning an instrument, or if it doesn't help you learn an instrument necessarily, it can help you understand music better. So any questions before we move on to talking about sheet music specifically? Okay. So first we're going to talk about what is notation. So music notation refers to how we visually represent music. So it's all these little symbols that you see down here. That's what we mean when we say notation. So it's just the different notes and symbols, and they represent the duration of the sounds. And we'll get into what these symbols specifically refer to, but that's what we mean by notation. And it can be by any instrument, which includes the voice. So what is sheet music? Sheet music is a form of music notation that is written or printed. So what are the benefits to being able to read and write music? So reading and writing music, sheet music, it's that universal language for musicians. So it's where any musician who can read and write sheet music can look at it and know exactly how the song is going to go. They can see it from the beginning to end. They can see, exactly how to play in time with other musicians. So even if you're not playing an instrument that has pitch, so guitar, piano, something like that, if you're a drummer, if you're playing, you're just doing hand claps, or you're a singer, you can still see exactly how the song is formatted, the key that it's in, everything. So it'll help everyone communicate and understand exactly what they're doing so everyone can follow along together. So that's the benefit of being able to read and write it as well. And it's also really helpful for teaching yourself music. So sheet music is available for free on many different websites. You can Google it, and there's people who just really like to, write out the sheet music for popular songs. Or even like you can buy just booklets of sheet music. Well, when you can read and write music, you can look at it and say, okay, here's this, pop song that I love. Well, I can see exactly how to play it. And then you can follow along and teach yourself, just like looking at a phrase book for, a language like Spanish or French, it tells you, phonetically, oh, here's how you say this sentence or this phrase. When you practice and play along with it, that's how you can teach yourself. And I know that doesn't work for everyone, but that is a benefit of it if that is something that is helpful for you, to be able to physically see something rather than just listen to it. Oh, the other thing I was going to mention is that sheet music is very helpful for songwriters, because if you've written a piece and you want it to be played, and maybe an instrument that you don't play, you could show it. You could write down what you've played, say on piano, show it to a guitarist who reads sheet music, and say, "I would like you to play this in guitar, piece for my song," or "Here's this piece that I've written. Could you maybe improvise something over what I've played?" And if they know what key you're in, if they know what you've played, that's going to make it a lot easier for them to play along with what you've written. So how do we read notation and read sheet music? So it's read left to right, just like a book or a sentence. You start on this side and just keep moving forward. Next line, read it left to right. So now we're going to break down what you're seeing when you're looking at sheet music. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the staff. So the staff refers to a set of 5 lines and 4 spaces that represent musical pitch. So it's these lines here and then these spaces between them. So these lines here, it's starting down here. So this is line 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And this is the staff. What you're seeing down here, this big one here, this is called a grand staff. You're going to commonly see this in like piano music. So this staff, or this part of the staff down here, is what your left hand would be doing when you're doing the bass. And this part of the staff here would be what your right hand is doing, where you're doing that sort of melody. This is the treble clef here. So that would be what you're doing both hands at the same time. And then they're combined here by a brace. So next we're talking about bar lines and measures. So the bar lines are these lines here, and they're what divide the staff into the different measures or bars. So bars and measures mean the same thing. It's just going to depend on like what country. We usually say measure here in the States, but between the UK and America, we use kind of like different language to talk about the same thing. So in England, they say stave instead of staff, but it means the same thing. So if you want to think about this little block here is a measure, one measure or one bar. And then these lines that separate them are bar lines. And then this double dark line here at the end is called the final bar line. Oops, sorry. It's called the final bar line, and it's for the end of that line. So next we'll talk about clefs. So the clef indicates which notes are represented by the lines on the spaces of the staff. So those lines aren't ever going to be labeled and say this is for this note or that note. You'll know automatically what those notes represent by what clef is on there. And the clef is going to be that first symbol that you see on the staff. And the 2 most common ones and the ones that we're going to talk about are going to be bass and treble. So the bass clefs, they represent those notes in the lower range, while the treble clefs are going to represent the notes in the higher range. There are many other clefs for different instruments or like orchestral music, but bass and treble are going to be the ones that we're going to cover just because they're the most common ones. So let's take a look at those 2 clefs. So here we have the treble clef, and then here, down here is where it's showing you, this is a symbol that you'll see, and then here what those notes represent. So the lines here, remember those 5 lines on the staff, those 5 lines when you're talking about a treble clef are always going to mean E, G, B, D, and F. The mnemonic device that's most commonly used to remember those letters is every good boy does fine. For the 4 spaces, you have F, A, C, E, which spells face. And as far as drawing the treble clef correctly, it's sort of this like almost like cursive S kind of looking symbol. But the one thing that needs to always be done when you're drawing it is that this loop here needs to encircle the G. So this like second line G. So these letters are going to keep repeating. So say you had a G that you wanted to represent as higher than this G. Well, you could draw a little line here above the staff. But when you're drawing the treble clef, it always needs to encircle this G specifically. Let's look, we've by the alto clef, do you mean the bass clef, Vince? Okay. I'm not familiar with the viola. My instrument is the guitar and then a little bit with piano. So for like orchestral instruments, they will have different clefs. Those ones I am not familiar with the lettering for those ones. Thank you. Okay, so that's the treble clef here. So yeah, every good boy does fine, and then the space is FACE. And if you notice when you go like one by letter or line, space, the letters are in alphabetical order. So E on the line, F on the space, G on the line, and then for music notes, it's only A through G. So then it starts over with A here in the space, B on the line, C in the space, D on the line, E in the space, F on the line. And then if you needed to go higher than that, you would have G here in the space. You could draw another line, and then you'd start over at A drawn on the line. And we'll see a little bit of what that looks like. Any questions on the treble clef before we move on to talk about the bass clef? Okay, so the bass clef. Oh, looks like we do have a question. Okay.
I just wanted to know, we do not learn anymore with do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do?
So that's when we refer to like pitch. For these here, this is the where we're just talking about sheet music, and so the notation. So the these letters here are representing the the note name. So like, you know, B, or if this was in a different like key, B flat. So that's what this represents here. So do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do is like the pitches that would represent these notes like when you're singing them. Okay, so for the bass clef here, so these will represent the lower pitches. So the notes on the lines, they are G, B, D, F, A. And so commonly, and you can use if you have another pneumatic device that will help you more. But the one that I usually use and usually see is good boys do fine always. And then the spaces are A, C, E, and G, which we usually use all cows eat grass. So not as easy to remember as face, but even if you just remember one of them, good boys do fine always, or all cows eat grass, it's good to keep in mind that the notes are going in alphabetical order. So it's not some kind of random order. It is just going G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then back to A. Any questions on these before we move on to the next slide? Okay. So now we'll talk about key signatures. So key signature is a set of sharp or flat symbols after the clef that represent the key that the music was written in. So you'll always see it in this order. So the very first symbol you're going to see on the staff, you're going to see the clef, and then you're going to see a symbol here to represent the key. And so in the next workshop, we'll dive more into all the different keys and what they sound like, and how they're represented here on the sheet music. This one, for example, is for B flat major. And so how you would write these correctly is that B flat major has 2 flats. And so we remember again that the treble clef represents every good boy does fine. So we have every good boy. So our flat symbol is going to be on the line representing the B for B flat to represent that anytime any note is played and it's put on this line here written, it'll be played as a B flat rather than a B natural. And that might not mean anything to you guys yet, but we will get more into that. But that's what this means when you put this on the line. So you wouldn't put it in a space unless that means that there's a C flat. So for example, the other flat that's in B flat major is E flat. So we have the E flat in the space here because remember face F-A-C-E. So whenever you see a key signature, wherever the flat or sharp, flat or sharp symbol. So the flat is this like little B, and then the sharp is like the pound or I guess hashtag. Either way, the little crosshatch symbol represents the sharps. Wherever those are written on the staff, that's what note is going to be, flat or sharp. If you don't see one there, that means that it is written in a key that does not have any sharps or flats, and there's only 2, which is A minor and C major. So it would be one of those, but every other key is going to have some number of flats or sharps. All right. So next, let's talk about the note value. So we're kind of just going left to right. So we're starting with just, here's the staff, here are the lines, here's what you see first with the clef, here's what you'll see next with the key signature, and let's talk about what you'll see with the notes. So I'm sure most of these symbols are familiar, at least visually, but you may not have known what they represented or how they're used. So a whole note, looks like we have, thank you, Wes. Yep. Thank you. Wes has put in the chat what the flat and sharp symbols look like. Okay, so a whole note is this one that kind of looks like a squashed 0, a little bit thicker, and this is a whole note. So when we talk about 4/4 time signature, which will be on the next slide, that is equal to 4 beats. But regardless of the time signature, a whole note is going to represent a whole measure. So when we have the bars and we have the bar lines, that one bar, if you were writing out on your sheet music and you use a whole note, that would be the only note in that one bar. So it fills an entire bar. A half note represents 1/2 of a whole note. A quarter note represents 4 of a whole note. An eighth note represents 8 or in a whole note. 16th is half of an eighth note. So by then, at that point, it's kind of getting to math. So we got whole, half, quarter, eighth, 16th. This symbol, very common on like music themed jewelry and things like that. This is not a special type of note. What it is that it's representing this line here across is called a beam. And what this means is that it's only used for eighth notes or smaller. So if you see that they have these little like tails kind of hanging off of these here, when you have 2 that are in a rhythmic group, so like dun dun, where they were played in quick succession, you can connect them using a beam. But all it represents is that those 2 are grouped together. So you can group more than 2 together. You could group 6 together, you could group 3 together, but that just means that they're rhythmically grouped, but their note value does not change. So this is still 2 eighth notes. If it was a 16th note, there would be another beam here. And then this here is a chart that's showing the equivalency between the symbols that represent the notes and their accompanying rest. So when you have like a bar or a measure, if you do not play a note, you still have to represent that with a rest. So if you have, so if you're supposed to play 4, like in 4/4, so you're supposed to play 4 beats, so 1, 2, 3, 4, right, to mean 1 bar. If you play 1, no note, 2, no note, you would do quarter symbol, quarter rest, quarter symbol, quarter rest. So these are the symbols that mean the exact same thing as these, except for they relate to a duration of silence. So if you have these, that means that either whatever instrument or vocals or anything that's happening right there, that's a silent part. There's no sound that's happening. But for music notation, you can't just put nothing there. Even if that's true, even if nothing's happening there, you do have to symbolize that some way. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about time signatures, which I sort of alluded to when we were talking about the notes. So a time signature, which is going to follow the key signature on your staff, it kind of looks like a fraction. It is not a fraction. You don't reduce it. What it represents is it's representing how many beats per bar. So if you have 1 bar, this is saying that you're going to have 4 quarter notes is going to equal 1 bar. And so you can break that down however you want, as long as you're getting those 4 beats. So if you have a whole note, you would just put 1 whole note, and that would cover that 1 bar, right? Because 4 quarter notes go into 1 whole note. You could have 2 half notes. You could have was it 2, 4? You could have 8 eighth notes, but all it has to do is it has to add up to that 4. So that 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is the most common time signature. So for most, like especially modern music that you're going to hear, pop music, it's really kind of across all genres. It's going to be in 4/4. I know this can be kind of confusing to hear, so I was going to just play something that is in 4/4 for you to hear it. And so I'm going to play the song Jolene by Dolly Parton. And what you want to listen for, so you can kind of hear what we're talking about when we talk about the time signature, is listen to the drums. So you're going to hear sort of that like bass drum kind of tapping in the background, and it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's what we mean when we talk about 4/4. So I'm just going to play a clip of that just before she starts singing, so you can kind of not be distracted. And hopefully
No one likes living with a broken phone.
You broke your phone, so Verizon broke.
Sorry, very long ad. Okay. 1, 2.
Jolene, 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 Jolene.
So let's start back again. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Jolene,
1, 2, 3,
Jolene,
4.
Jolene,
1, 2, 3, 4.
Jolene. I'm begging of you, please don't take my man.
So is playing it kind of help to kind of hear that when you're hearing that drum? The benefit of drum is that the drums are always going to keep time. And any song you hear, when you hear the drum is sort of that the rhythm keeper. So the drum is in the background. It's going 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's going to do that through the whole song. Now you can mix time signatures in a song. It's not the easiest thing to do, and it's definitely not necessary. Most songs are going to keep the same time signature throughout the whole song. It's easier to play, easier when you're listening to be like, okay, it's keeping the same beat the whole time. Let me go back. Okay. So that's 4/4. So again, so 4/4, it's meaning that it can be any combination of those notes that we saw on the other screen. So whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, 16th notes, eighth notes, as long as the notes all add up to 4 quarter notes. Okay. So next when we talk about 6/8. So 6/8 is what's called a compound time signature. And so what 6/8 means is that one bar equals 6/8 notes. So basically this is telling you, so just like this one was saying 4 quarter notes. So right, so 4 quarter notes. This one's saying 6/8 notes. So 6/8 notes are going to make one bar. And 6/8 is going to, it'll have that sort of waltz feel, but it is used a lot in like rock and pop songs. But 6/8 is that like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're going to hear a version, or not a version, sorry, an example of that, which is the song Lover by Taylor Swift, which is a very, very recent song. I think it came out like last year. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
We could leave the
And I'll play it again just for you to hear again and to listen again to those drums. So when it hits that 1, you're hearing a kick drum, but when it's hitting that 4, it's showing definitely a little bit slightly weaker. So not as like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. When it hits on the snare on the 4. So that's what you want to listen for. That like swaying feel. So the difference between all these time signatures, and I'm only mentioning 3, there's really as many as you can think of, but the difference is going to be in the way that it feels. So when it's doing that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it kind of has that almost like slow dance, like ballad kind of like quality to it, where you just kind of like sway to that sort of beat. And that's a little bit different to that 4/4, which kind of more has that like kind of head bobbing, sort of clapping to it kind of vibe. Okay, so next we're going to talk about 3/4. So 3/4 is it's sort of almost exclusively used for waltzes, or I don't mean it that way. For a waltz, it's almost definitely going to be 3/4. You could, I suppose, use 6/8 for a waltz, but most likely it's going to be 3/4. 3/4 does get used in like pop music and things like that. But it's widely known for being used for waltzes. And the difference between 3/4 and 6/8, which can sometimes be very hard to tell, but the difference between the two is going to be that for 3/4, when we go the 1, 2, 3, 1, or sorry, count it off. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That 1 is always going to be like an accented beat. Versus in 6/8, it's at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That 1 is always going to be more accented than the 4. For 3/4, that 3, when it comes in 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That 1 is always accented. So that's how you can kind of hear that difference. And again, drums make it much easier to tell, because like in the Lover song, when we would hear the kick and then we'd hear that snare come in, they were on different beats, and one was definitely more accented than the other. So we're gonna hear What the World Needs Now, which is in 3/4.
What the world
2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
is love, sweet love.
1.
It's the only thing that there's just too little of. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just for some, but for everyone.
So the drums on this one are, it's not as hard hitting as in Jolene, but you just, all the instruments are playing that 1, 2, 3. So I'll play it over again.
What the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just for some, but for everyone.
And for every song, it's going to be, it can be any instrument that's showing that sort of like accented note. It's what we refer to it as. For this one, that sort of like bass was always coming in right on the 1. So it's like ba-bum, 2, 3, ba-bum, 2, 3, ba-bum, 2, 3, ba-bum, 2, 3, ba-bum. If it was 4 or 5, or not 4, 5, 6, if it was 6, 8, it wouldn't come in like that every single time on the 1, because the 4 would need to be weaker. So again, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so that it more has a feel of a grouping of like 3 rather than a grouping of 2. The Taylor Swift song was an example of 6, 8. And it was Lover. Which, yeah, I think was either a year or 2 ago that song came out. It's a fairly recent song. And yeah, definitely big pop song. So that's kind of cross genre. There are other ones like 5, 4 or 12, 8 that are more common in like rock music or metal music or R&B. But they're not genre specific. It's more just ones that are more common in certain genres. Again, for that like feel of the song, if you want a song that has that waltzy sway kind of feeling, then you might want to write something that's in 6, 8. And again, so even though this symbol is saying that you need 6/8 notes to make one measure, it can be any combination. So you can use quarter notes, you can use half notes, you can use a combination of them. It just has to add up to those 6/8 notes. And then same thing for here, it has to add up to 3/4 notes for one measure. So it could be a half note and a quarter note. It could be like 2/8 notes and 2/4 notes. It's just gonna depend on your song. So any questions for or about time signatures? Okay, so let's kind of bring it all together to talk about reading sheet music. So this right here is a small little snippet for the sheet music for the song Happy Birthday. So now you can tell everyone that you know that Happy Birthday is written in 3/4. So Happy Birthday, yeah, is written in 3/4. It can be written in a variety of key signatures, but yeah, this was just the one that we have here. And let me pull up. What didn't wanna. Sorry, I was gonna play for you so you can. I mean, I'm sure we all know what Happy Birthday looks like, but just so you can hear these notes down here. Let me stop share for just a second. I'm gonna pull up Pro Tools. Pro Tools has a very great feature where anything that you play in it using a MIDI keyboard, which we do have here at Creative Experience, it will come up as sheet music automatically for you. Let me just pull this up. Sorry, brief technical difficulties. Okay. Is everyone seeing what is Pro Tools? It should say happy birthday notes. Okay, good. Okay. So I don't know if you guys can still see my camera, but if you can, I have here to my my right our MIDI keyboard here in Creative Experience. And so what a MIDI keyboard is, if you're not familiar with it, it does not make any audio or sound on its own. What it does is it can mimic really any instrument by connecting to a software that can read MIDI, sort of the very basic gist of what a MIDI keyboard does. It's laid out like a piano because that's sort of the easiest way to communicate the different notes rather than, you know, have like a plastic fake guitar or something. This is a much easier way to lay out the notes. So that's what I played this in. And as you can see here, Pro Tools has automatically made sheet music for what I've played. So this is what it looks like in Pro Tools when you played it. You can see like a little tiny keyboard here to the side, and that just represents that I'm playing with the MIDI. And this is what it comes up as. It's going to automatically give you a grand staff. Here's, if you remember this, the treble and bass clef here. You can change it. This is just what it defaults to. Let's, hopefully, I'm pretty sure I checked sound. And so you can see it as it plays across, you'll see it playing the different notes. Okay, so so these here, does anyone remember what this is called? These two notes here? No, that's okay. These are eighth notes and they're connected by a beam. So when you're playing Happy Birthday, you kind of like that dun 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 dun. So that dun dun, those are eighth notes and they're played rhythmically in a group. So it's dun dun. So you're just tapping the key. If you can see my finger, you're gonna tap the key very quickly in eighth notes in succession. So instead of eighth note, you're doing very quickly. And that's represented here by the beam. So this is that rhythmic grouping. Again, so their note value is not different, but it's just representing how they're played. And then, does anyone remember what this note value is?
Quarter?
Yes, exactly. Quarter note. Yep. Perfect. Quarter note. This one here. It looks like a quarter note, but not filled in.
Half.
Yes, exactly, half note. And then as we'll see here, this symbol here, if anyone remembers what this symbol is or what it represents?
Half rest.
That is close. So it is a rest. That is a quarter rest. And so the reason why it's a quarter rest is that, so we remember that this is in 3/4. So that means that there has to be the equivalent of 3 quarter notes for each of these measures here. And so the last note played here on this line is a half note. And so even though nothing is played after it, that nothing, that space, that emptiness has to be represented in the measure some way. So we have a half note, which is 2 quarter notes. So then it automatically is going to fill the space with a quarter rest. So it's saying that adds up to 3. So your rests are part of that measure. And then if you look here at all the other spaces where these lines have not been filled out yet, I didn't play anything. This little square here, that's what it looks like when it's a whole rest. So that is quite literally saying nothing was played there. So when you write sheet music, you have to put those symbols. Now, if you really only wanted to write down or communicate to someone, here's how this line is played, no, you don't need to fill out the rest of the sheet music with whole rest. That's not necessary. But Pro Tools is automatically going to do it because that is what it's saying. So Pro Tools just plays it all the way through. And so what it's saying, it's like nothing else was played here. So those are whole rests there. Let me.
So Anna, just keeping an eye on time. We've got about 9 minutes left here.
Oh, okay.
And then, yeah, it looks like we got a question. What is the difference between Pro Tools and GarageBand?
They're just, they have different software makers. So Pro Tools is made by Avid. GarageBand is made by Apple. They both can handle MIDI, and they're both what's called a digital audio workstation. They just have different features. I don't believe GarageBand has a like score feature the way that Pro Tools does. But they both have similar functions as far as editing, mixing, and recording MIDI, and you can record live instruments if you have GarageBand like on a computer. But GarageBand is only available on Apple products. Pro Tools, you can have them on a Mac, you can have them on a PC. It does not work on Chromebooks. I don't think either of them do. I don't think Apple makes a Chromebook. Okay. Sorry. Go back to sharing. Okay. So yeah, so we're running a little short on time, but that's okay. 4-part workshop. So it just might mean that we'll start with this next week, whatever we don't finish up today. Yeah, just have a couple more slides. So lastly, we're going to talk about pitch. So pitch at its most basic is the frequency of a sound. So frequency.
All right, we're still seeing Pro Tools.
Oh. This is what I was having trouble with when I was trying to do it earlier. Okay. What about now?
Yep, you got it.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So frequency is what it sounds like. It's meaning how often something is happening per unit of time. So frequency is measured in hertz. And so every single note is going to have its own frequency. And really every single sound. So human speech has its own frequency. Car rumblings have their own speech, heartbeats or not, have their own pitch and have their own frequency. So when we talk about like pitch with music, middle C, which is C4, so basically on a piano, it's gonna be that 4th C note. It has a frequency of 261 hertz, but C2, which is lower, so it's going to be closer on this end of the piano, it has a frequency of about 65 hertz. So that's what you're hearing when you hear the difference between notes. So these are both C notes, but they have completely different frequencies. So how is pitch represented on sheet music and in music? So pitch is represented by the letters A through G. So kind of what was brought up earlier, the do, re, mi, fa, sol, that's pitch. And how those like are represented in music are by the letters A through G. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and it just repeats over and over again. Every time you go from, A to coming around to the next A, that's considered an octave. So octave, eight notes, 8 letters. Once you come back right around again, and that works for every single one. So C to C, octave, D to D, 1 octave. So on sheet music, the lines and the spaces are going to represent each of those letters. So the notes that are written higher are going to be higher in pitch than those that are lower. So what we're seeing here is that so this E here is much higher than this E down here, but it's still even higher than this E here. And we're running low on time, but and this is something we'll go through next week about hearing that difference between these are E. If you play them together, they're going to sound perfectly in harmony, but they do have different pitches. They have different frequencies. And then again, this is what we call a grand staff. And these middle C's here, even though it looks like they're totally written on different lines, that is the same exact note. Oops. It's the same note. It's just that's how it's written for the bass clef and versus written for the treble clef. And so then, yeah, so just to recap here. So music theory is referring to the theoretical aspects of music rather than the actual playing of music. It's more explaining music. Everyone can benefit from it, whether you're a musician or not a musician, but it is not necessary to play an instrument or to learn how to make it, to learn how to make music. And then sheet music, it's the universal language of musicians, and it's going to help you to communicate your music with other people, to be able to write down your music, to remember it later, to show it to other people, and then to be able to read it, to learn how to accurately play other songs. So just how we saw those notes, this is a quarter note, these are eighth notes. When you learn how to play those on whatever your instrument is, you'll know you're playing it correctly if you're following the sheet music accurately. And then further music theory resources beyond this workshop, we have LinkedIn Learning with the library. If you go to the library's website and you go to digital resources, you can use LinkedIn Learning. And we also have online Gale courses as well. Any questions on anything that we covered? And again, we'll be elaborating on a lot of these next week, next Wednesday. Oh, thank you, Jan. Appreciate it. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. So next week we'll be talking about the major and minor scales. We'll be elaborating more on what we talked about with keys, what those sound like. We'll break it all down, and we'll mainly be using the piano, but I'll try to bring in my guitar as well to kind of show you what that looks like. It sounds the same, but tonally is different, which is also something that we'll be talking about in this workshop. We have a couple minutes left in case anyone had anything. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for coming. You guys were great, and hope to see everyone next week.
Thank you.